What's up, y'all? We are back for episode 4 of our Philly 10K build series, and today's topic is on why your heart rate matters more than your pace. In today's running culture, I feel that there is a over-fixation on running fast and having the fastest pace. Now, it is fantastic and very impressive when it comes to racing. However, every time you go for a run, it does not have to be at your fastest pace. This is a mistake that I made within, I'm going to say, my earlier journey of training and racing when it comes to endurance training. And so after reading some books, after learning, and after even going through certain experiences, I've learned that your heart rate is really the driving force of your overall performance level and your overall health and your longevity within the sport of running or any endurance training or endurance competitions that you may be doing. So in today's video, we're going to be tying some information from the big book of endurance training and racing, and I want to touch on the aerobic deficiency syndrome and too much stress from excessive anaerobic work and this first beginning portion of the video. So when it comes to the aerobic deficiency syndrome, this can result in a lot of complications, including fatigue, increased body fat, chronic inflammation, physical injuries, hormonal imbalances, reduced endurance, and nutritional imbalances as well. And these can cause a lot of complications, in your training, in your performance, and lead to, an unhealthy state overall within your body. And when it comes to excessive anaerobic stress, you can get higher cortisol levels, which can have a negative impact on your brain. It can also have an impact on your metabolism and your muscles, which can really impair performance and reduce, how much you can train at a quality level. There can also be an increase in insulin, which can decrease fat burning. There can be a decrease in your overall aerobic muscles, which are pretty much the main muscles that are going to be utilized during endurance training. And now, the main solution to the aerobic deficiency syndrome, or even having too much stress that is a result from a lot of anaerobic work, is to focus on building your aerobic base. And this is the period of time where an athlete is solely focusing on their aerobic function. They're solely focusing on allowing their body to better utilize fat during their endurance training. And what this is going to do is help reduce the risk of injury. You'll be able to put out much less effort within your training, and you'll recover much better and you'll feel better overall. Now to start, you want to identify your max aerobic heart rate, which you'll take 180 subtracted by your age, and then you're going to ask yourself 4 questions and see which category that you fit into. So the first question you're going to want to ask yourself is, if you have or are recovering from a major illness, that can be heart disease, an operation, a surgery, whatever the case may be, or you are on any regular medication, you'll want to subtract 10. Second up, if you are injured, have regressed in training or competition, get more than 2 colds or bouts of flu per year, you have allergies or asthma, or if you've been inconsistent or just getting back into your training, you're going to subtract an additional 5. Number 3, if you have been training consistently at least 4 times a week for up to 2 years without any problems, as just mentioned, keep the number the same, the 180 minus your age. And then if you've been training for more than 2 years without any of the problems listed above, have made progress in competition without injury, then you can add 5. So say, for example, someone is 30, they'll take 180 minus 30, they'll get 150. And then say they fit into category B, which again, they've been injured or regressed, maybe they have allergies or asthma, they're going to subtract an additional 5. So then their max aerobic heart rate is going to be, so 180 minus 30, you get 150. Then you'll take 150 minus 5, and you'll get that max aerobic heart rate of 145 beats per minute. So pretty much that's where they're going to get essentially the most bang for their buck. The closer that they can train at that max aerobic heart rate, they'll get more aerobic benefits. Now you can create a range. You'll just subtract 10 from that max aerobic heart rate. So this person's range will be 135 to 145, and that will be the zone that they will want to train in for their aerobic work or to boost their aerobic function, within their endurance training. And then from there, the next step is I would recommend getting a heart rate monitor. So when you're out doing your training, whether that's running, that can be cycling, that can be swimming, you'll be able to identify or be able to know and track where your heart rate is, and you'll be able to also see where your pace lines up with that heart rate. So say if you're starting at a 9 minute per mile at your max aerobic heart rate, then you can pretty much continue to train in the area. And what we want to see is over time that pace dropping within the same heart rate. So pretty much you're able to put out less energy, you're able to exert yourself much less, and you're able to increase your performance in a very progressive and sustainable manner. And now you may be wondering, what if I don't have a heart rate monitor, or what if I don't really want to track my heart rate, or I don't really want to get too complex like that? What you can do, which I really recommend getting the heart rate monitor. However, you can, go out and train, and you can just, measure your challenge level or exertion with the RPE scales we talked about in the previous videos. Is your RPE is rate of perceived exertion, and then you'll pretty much just check in with yourself, see how you're feeling, and you'll want to be at about a level 3 to 4, more so at a conversational pace, not overexhausting yourself, but also not going too easy so that you're not getting the max amount of aerobic benefits that you can get within your training. And next up, I want to touch on anaerobic and aerobic work. Now, aerobic work is pretty much endurance training, whether it's running, it can be cycling, it can be swimming. That's pretty much within your max aerobic heart rate range or closer to your max aerobic heart rate. And again, you'll get the most benefits by training closer to that number. So that's going to, again, lead to less exertion and really allow you to train in a much more sustainable manner. And when we look at anaerobic work, that's going to be any form of activity or endurance training that's above your max aerobic heart rate. Strength training is also a form of anaerobic training, as you're using more fast twitch muscles, and you're also utilizing more sugar during that form of exercise within that strength training. And 3 reasons why you'll want to have a strong aerobic base is because you'll really begin to utilize fat at a much higher level for your endurance training, and that'll really lead to increasing your performance levels, as again, you'll be able to put out much less exertion, you'll be able to increase your pace, and you'll be able to keep your heart rate, at a lower volume. And that's important because the harder your heart has to work, it's going to, it's going to require more energy, it's going to require more fuel, and eventually you may burn out. And that's why at the end of races, you may feel fatigued, or maybe at the end of your runs, you may feel extremely fatigued if you're going too much on an anaerobic fashion within your training. You'll also reduce your risk of injuries because you won't be putting too much stress on your body, which can be very transformational within your training. You'll be much more encouraged to get out there and run. You'll have much less frustration because injuries can be frustrating. I've definitely experienced that myself. And you'll have a much more sustainable and progressive approach, to increasing your performance levels or increasing your paces over time. And also, as I look into my own training, so right now, as I discussed in the last video or in the previous video, I am using a little bit more anaerobic work within this current phase as I'm preparing for the Philly 10K, and it's been going pretty good. I have noticed just a little bit more soreness, just a little bit more, fatigue from the anaerobic sessions compared to when I was doing a little bit more strictly aerobic work. However, I'm just going to ride it out up until the Philly 10K, and then afterwards, I'm really from reading this book, I'm getting very inspired to just take about 6 months to a year to fully build a strong aerobic base. I feel like since I've gotten into running, it's been more so, getting into it and experimenting, running fast. And that really didn't get me to where I feel as though I can really get to. And I think as I can really take a, patient and progressional, sustainable approach of really building a strong aerobic base, I'll be much more improved and a much more efficient runner as I continue to grow. And so I'm going to, again, just be taking that time to just build a strong aerobic base, really help my body learn how to utilize fat during my training and during races. And my goal is to be able to, maintain those faster paces. Again, my current goal right now is to maintain a 6:30 or below average minute per mile for a 10K. Half marathon, and I've done it before in a 5K. However, I do want to, I want it to be a little more consistent, and it would be amazing to be able to keep my max aerobic heart rate, which is right around like 147. Keep that max aerobic heart rate during those faster paces within those competitions. So that's going to be my personal goal. That's going to be my next approach following the Philly 10K, and I'm excited for the journey. I have, again, been able to see just much more improvements and much less risk of injury and much less actual injuries when I do train in more of an aerobic fashion. So I'm excited for it. But that is going to be this week's video, and I do want to take a closing minute to just give some time to honor my grandfather who recently passed in July, and it's been very tough, on myself and my family. He was a really big father figure for me. growing up, grew up in the same household with him, seen him every single day. We spent a good amount of time together, even as I got older, watching Eagles games, going to Phillies games, and even traveling into the city to work as he was still working into his mid-70s. So we'll always love my pop-up, William King Jr. And, this video is going to be for this. A lot of my training is going to be in reflection of him. His birthday is actually on the Philly Half Marathon, November 21st. So I'm going to be running for him and my cousin who was killed last year. So a lot of fuel to my fire. Definitely hit me pretty hard. I was, beating myself up a bit because I feel as though with training and with coaching and just growing as an entrepreneur, it was a little bit challenging to see him these past couple of months. So I do want to take the time again just to honor him and, dedicate a lot of my training going forward, to him. He lived a wonderful life. He'll always be loved by myself and my family. And, it's definitely tough to go through. However, it is an aspect of life that none of us can avoid. However, we got to really take the time to, prioritize those family times, even in the midst of being busy, even in the midst of, earning an income, making a living, and building a business or whatever you may be focusing on. It is definitely key to, prioritize that time with our loved ones. So this was my pop-up, and I will check y'all on the next one. Peace and love.